Chapter 2541 The Harder They Fall Plus, Turn Off Reset. The roof of the great tower was flat, with a low parapet running around its perimeter. The stones were slick and wet, covered in water, the sky above was dark with storm clouds, and torrential rain pelted everything with a primal fury. The winds here were strong, as well, howling as they strained to push anyone foolish enough to ascend the tower down, into a fatal fall. It really seemed like the heavens had burst open, unleashing a world-ending flood. The flying vehicle, a helicopter, stood in the middle of the roof, and Maddox was standing in front of it. Sunny was not sure what a helicopter was supposed to look like, really, but he was pretty sure that it was not supposed to be on fire, tilted to one side, and spouting billowing pillars of acrid black smoke. Huh? Just as Sunny leaped over the last few steps of the long staircase, feeling his leg muscles burning, there was a bright flash. A second later, a blinding bolt of lightning struck the burning machine, sending a swarm of sparks flying in all directions. Maddox staggered back, covering his face with an arm. Sunny froze for a split second. Well. He remembered the previous bolts of lightning that had landed somewhere above them during the battle for the courtyard. Back then, he did not waste any time thinking where they had hit, but really, it made sense. This was the highest point of the castle, and there was nothing around them but the vast expanse of the lake. Naturally, lightning would be attracted to a huge machine made of metal standing on an elevated point. It seemed that whoever the other Mordred had paid to design this helipad was terrible at their job. Sunny was not going to complain, though. It was high time for him to get a little lucky. Now, at least, the enemy was not going to escape at the last moment. Raising his revolver, Sunny aimed it at the chairman of the Valor Group. Freeze! Maddox spun around, piercing him with an infuriated gaze. You vermin! Anger, indignation, humiliation, there were a lot of hues to his voice, but remorse was not one of them. Even now that he had nowhere else to run, he was not sorry for what he had done, he was only sorry about getting caught. Outraged by it, really. Hearing his companions catching up, Sunny smiled darkly and said in a cold, even tone, Mr. Maddox, you are under arrest. The wind howled louder as he said those words. Ah, it feels good. Sunny was not the devil detective. Still, he had walked a mile in the troubled detective's shoes, and had experienced his obsessive determination to bring the nihilist to justice, even if it meant going against the omnipotent Valor Group. The nihilist did not really exist, but his victims had not become less real because of that. 7 people had been brutally murdered, and now, the man responsible for their deaths was standing in front of him. Even if both the victims and the killer were not real people, and the details of the case had simply been concocted by the Castellan, it still felt good to solve it. Looking at Maddox, Sunny felt a strange sense of accomplishment. Maddox, meanwhile, snarled. Under arrest? Me? He laughed. Sure, go ahead. Arrest me. Let us see if there is an attorney in this city who dares to prosecute me, or a judge who dares to convict me. Sunny's smile turned darker still. You know, Mr. Maddox, it's not very wise to boast about something like that to a man aiming a gun at you. At that moment, Effie and the rest finally arrived. Saint appeared on the roof last, looking even more haggard than she had in the throne room. Maddox's eyes widened a little when he saw Morgan. Then, he froze and scowled when 2 versions of Mordred came into view. What is this? Taking a step back, Maddox rubbed his eyes and stared at the 2 identical men once more. For a moment, he glanced unsure of himself, but then his expression returned to normal. He seemed to have come up with some kind of explanation to resolve the maddening contradiction of the world. A stand-in? Huh. I should have known. The other Mordred sighed. Uncle. His expression was troubled. Just as Sunny was satisfied with finally catching the true culprit behind the nihilist killings, the other Mordred must have felt the opposite. The Castellan had changed the background of Mirage City to cater to its new guests, but by doing so, the truth familiar to its sole permanent inhabitant had also been changed. Perhaps the other Mordred wanted to tell his uncle that it was not his fault. After all, Maddox had not been a murderous conspirator just a few days ago, he had been made into the mastermind of the nihilist murders by the Castellan. But what was the point? Saying something like that meant admitting that Maddox was not a real person. And if he was not a real person, telling him anything had no point. The other Mordred seemed to be caught in this bitter contradiction, not knowing what to say. His counterpart, however, had no such problem. As Maddox backed away, Mordred took a step forward and smiled. Ah. As much as it pains me to admit, I am starting to see the allure of living in this sweet illusion. I was denied the pleasure of killing Whispering Blade with my own 2 hands, but now, the Great Mirror is offering me another chance. Of course, it is not exactly the real deal, but beggars can't be choosers. Can we? Maddox's back met the parapet, and he looked back with a wary expression. Well played, nephew, well played. You drove me into a corner. I hope you don't think that I am out of cards, though. Police, really? Do you really think that you can bring me down with just that? Mordred's smile just widened slightly. Effie stared at his back for a moment, then turned to Sunny with a confused expression. All right, we got him. But what do we do with him now? How are we going to lure out the Castellan? Sunny frowned. That was a good question, indeed. I think. But before he could answer, Mordred finally reached the reflection of his uncle. Without saying anything else or changing his expression, he calmly raised a hand and pushed Maddox over the parapet. Everything happened so swift that none of them managed to react in time. By the time the other Mordred flinched and Morgan took an involuntary step forward, Maddox was already gone from view. A panicked scream resounded from the darkness, muffled by the howling of the wind and the roaring thunder. Half a dozen seconds later, the scream was cut abruptly somewhere far below. Mordred dusted off his hands and turned to them with a pleasant smile. Well, that's taken care of. For some reason, Sunny did not like the look of his smile. Am I missing something? He scowled, trying to understand why he was suddenly feeling uneasy. Surely, it was not because of Maddox's death. The only surprising thing about it was that it had come abruptly and without warning. He had not really expected Maddox to survive, to begin with. However, before Sunny could finish the thought, he was interrupted once again. This time it was because of a low, rumbling sound that suddenly washed over them, shaking the very foundations of the world. A distant, rumbling roar washed over the world, making it seem as if everything had gone still for a moment. It sounded like an enormous beast was stirring awake somewhere far away, rising from its slumber as forests and mountains rolled off its broad shoulders. There was a flash of lightning. Half blinded by the rain, Sunny unconsciously took a step toward the parapet. The others did the same, all looking in a single direction with tense, confused expressions, toward the source of the rumbling sound. They were facing north. What? Effie's voice drowned in a deafening thunderclap. Sunny inhaled sharply. Somehow, he knew what had happened, and what was going to happen, as well. The world was dark, obscured by the heavy storm clouds. Still, some light penetrated their thick barrier, and Mirage City was enveloped in a dim twilight. The restless surface of the Mirror Lake was stirring in front of them, and beyond it, the great mass of the drowning city sprawled on the distant shore. Beyond the city were the mountains, and the ancient barrier of the northern dam. That dam was breaking apart now, unable to endure the crushing weight of the artificial lake hidden behind it. It had held proud for thousands of years, withstanding the ruthless tyranny of time and the fierce assaults of natural forces, but it had not been able to withstand human corruption. The subpar renovation works perpetrated by the Valor Group on Maddox's orders had compromised its integrity, and the disastrously persistent rains had caused the great reservoir contained by the dam to swell uncontrollably, pushing it to and over the limit. And now, it could not hold any longer. Sunny's eyes widened as he watched the calamity unfold. At first, it was a single crack that appeared on the great dam. The floodgates had already been opened to relieve the pressure, with foaming torrents of water pouring down from a vast height. However, that was not enough. The crack split the dam from top to bottom, spreading across its surface with the speed of lightning. It was narrow and barely noticeable, almost impossible to see. However, a second later, that small crack became a devastating breach. The still water of the reservoir had become an unstoppable monster, wielding power so awful that millions of tons of stone and concrete were flung outward as if shot from a cannon. The entire middle section of the dam exploded, with giant chunks of stone flying into the outskirts of the city below and crushing residential buildings as if they were paper boxes. What followed the annihilating debris was much worse, though. Sunny froze, enthralled by the distressing visage and unable to move. His companions were motionless, as well, witnessing the scene of utter destruction in a deafening silence. The water roared as it escaped its prison. It rushed through the wide breach in the damaged dam like a living being, hungering for human souls. The titanic torrent was too vast for its scale to be fathomed, or for its force to be measured. Looking at it, Sunny felt something that he had not felt in a long time. The utter, frightening awe that mortals felt in the face of the insurmountable power that dwarfed their very existence, the terrifying power of hostile, untamed nature. The torrent of water hit the outskirts of Mirage City and swallowed them whole, flowing far and wide to consume everything in sight. The buildings, the streets, the rushing PTVs, the tiny figures of the terrified people, all of it was washed away in an instant, crushed and broken, ground into nothingness and drowned in the foaming expanse of raging water. Of course, the flood did not stop there. The powerful current rushing through the breach in the dam did not weaken, on the contrary, as more of the dam collapsed, it became more potent. The great tidal wave that had swallowed the outskirts continued south, devastating the northern areas of Mirage City. The rivers running toward the Mirror Lake swelled and overflowed, escaping their beds. Their flooding caused by that was merely a promise of the imminent disaster, though. All across the city, the heavy iron covers of the drainage pipes were sent flying into the air. Towering plumes of foaming water shot upward like geysers. It was only then that the thunderous roar of the collapsing dam reached the distant parts of Mirage City, and people on the streets froze in place, looking north with confused expressions. The flood utterly crushed and destroyed the northernmost parts of Mirage City. However, the rest of it was not spared, either. Even if the obliterating force of the tidal wave had been exhausted as it moved further away from the broken dam, the water still continued flowing. In the districts north of Mirror Lake, the water flowed freely across the streets, rising higher and higher. It swallowed the PTVs and the pedestrians, collecting an unimaginable death toll. Some of the buildings were partially flooded, some even submerged in the water completely. The citizens trapped in them had not survived, either. Standing by Sunny's side, Effie let out a strange cry and grabbed the parapet, her fingers turning white. Finally, the flood reached the Mirror Lake. It stopped the torrent for a while. However, the level of water in the lake rapidly rose. Soon enough, the slopes of the mountain and the stone steps leading to the castle disappeared beneath the surging waves, leaving only the platform directly in front of the great gates above the tide. By then, the Mirror Lake had overflowed, as well. A secondary wave poured from the confines of its shores, joining the flood as it rushed south. The narrow streets there funneled the water, giving the torrents more strength. Nothing could withstand the terrible force of the flowing water, and everyone who had been looking north minutes earlier drowned with terrified expressions on their faces, unable to escape. Everything in sight had drowned in the vast, unstoppable current. Sunny had seen this scene before, he had seen it innumerable times. Every time the night came to the forgotten shore, the dark sea would flood the crimson labyrinth and destroy anything and anyone who had not found shelter from its fury. Only, this time, it was not abominations that were being destroyed by the rushing water, it was people. The streets of Mirage City become their watery grave. Something like that must have happened in the True Bastion, as well, thousands of years ago. Soon enough, the Mirror Lake seemed to have expanded greatly, growing to cover the entire area where Mirage City had once stood. Here and there, the edifices of skyscrapers rose from the water like orphaned towers, but most of the city was hidden under the mass of water. At the heart of the Great Lake, the castle stood lonesomely among the waves. The other Mordred swayed as he took a step back. His expression at the moment was hard to describe, even if someone was in a state to pay attention to such details. Everyone seemed stunned and petrified by what they had just witnessed. Except for Sunny. Sunny, on the contrary, was restless. I missed it. I missed it. Damn it. How could I have been so foolish? How could I have been fooled again? While everyone stood still, he suddenly spun around and raised his revolver. Aiming it at Mordred's head, Sunny then gritted his teeth and pressed the trigger. It was impossible to dodge a bullet, for a mundane human, at least. And yet, that was exactly what Mordred did. He had been looking at the harrowing sight of the drowning city with the rest of them a split second ago. But when Sunny's revolver thundered, aimed at his head point blank, he leaned sideways with superhuman speed, allowing the bullet to fly past. Damn it. Mordred took a step back, coming to stand near his other fragment. The first to react was Saint, even if she only turned to look in his direction. Morgan and Effie spun around, wary and trying to understand what had happened. The other Mordred was the last to realize what had happened, reeling back in shock. Mordred reached a hand and grabbed his arm, preventing him from losing his balance. Goodness gracious, Sunless. What was that for? His smile was as pleasant as ever, but it did not reach his eerie, mirror-like eyes. Sunny gritted his teeth. That was to slow you down. He knew, of course, that simply shooting Mordred was not going to kill him. But it was bound to destroy his body and force him to search for a new one. In fact, I should have aimed for the other one. Sunny belatedly realized that he had made a mistake. But there was no time to feel regret. He finally realized the source of the feeling that he was missing something that had been plaguing him ever since the throne room. Sadly, it was already too late. His hands are clean. When Mordred descended from the gallery, his hands were bloodied. But now, they were clean. It was a small detail that would not have mattered in most circumstances, but held a frightening meaning here in Mirage City. Sunny had failed to register the fact completely. But just now, as they were watching the city drown, he saw something in the periphery of his vision. It was so subtle that he paid it no attention at first, yet his subconscious kept pushing the thought of it to the forefront of his mind. That something was a thin tendril of white mist. Almost impossible to see in the heavy rain, it flowed from below the parapet and slowly reached Mordred. And was absorbed into his body. That white mist was the essence of the other who had played the role of Madoc before being killed by the Prince of Nothing. The body had fallen all the way down to the courtyard, shattering as it crashed into the roofs of the main keep first. It had taken the mist quite some time to reach all the way to the highest point of the great tower. That was probably the very reason why Mordred had chosen to kill Madoc by pushing him down. The body was gone now, just like the bodies of the rest slain by Saint disappeared without a trace. That was why the blood was gone from Mordred's hands. The corpses of the mercenaries he had killed dissolved into mist, and their blood followed. I should have realized sooner. Sunny cursed himself bitterly. It made so much sense, in hindsight. There were too many strange things about the Palace of Imagination, so, overwhelmed by them, he had not thought about the reason why Saint was able to absorb the ghostly essence of reflections in detail. The answer was obvious, though. It was because she had an affinity to nothing. And who had the same affinity, as well? It was Mordred, the Prince of Nothing. And the other Mordred, too. The latter had spent most of his life in Mirage City, but unlike his ruthless alter ego, he was not a murderous fiend. There had been no reason for him to kill anyone, and even if there had been, he wouldn't have. That was simply out of character for him. So, even after spending decades in the Palace of Imagination, he had never absorbed nothing, and had never regained his awakened power. But Mordred was different. He slaughtered the mercenaries and killed Madoc. Gods only knew how many the rest he had slain before meeting Sunny. Which meant that he had at least some of his power back, and had been hiding it. And that did not bode well. It did not bode well at all. Mordred laughed. Ah, it seems that I've been caught. Effie studied him tensely, then asked without looking away. Sunny? What is going on? Sunny lingered for a few seconds, feverishly trying to understand what Mordred was planning. Had he already reclaimed some of his power when they fought several days ago? Had he been pretending to be weak in order to lower Sunny's guard? Had every word spoken by Mordred been chosen carefully in order to manipulate him into doing what Mordred wanted him to do? What was he trying to achieve? Kill Morgan? Absorb the essence of the Castellan? Or something else? We are being double-crossed, that is what. Glaring at Mordred, he lowered his empty revolver and asked in a cold, murderous tone. Let me guess, that whole conversation about wanting to hide your other self on the Ivory Island to protect him from the Dreamspawn was a lie. Mordred shrugged with a smile. Of course. Did you really think I would entrust you with something so vital? To be honest, I never believed that either you or the Changing Star would be able to protect him from that fiend. You know what they say, Sunless, if you want something done well, do it yourself. So thank you kindly for the offer, but I won't be needing your services, we will go our own way, he and I. Sunny smirked. What? You think that you'll do a better job of protecting him than two sovereigns? Mordred's smile dimmed faintly. As a matter of fact, yes. I do believe that. You two have too much to lose, you see, the whole world, really. And that is exactly what the Dreamspawn will use to destroy you. But me? He grinned. I have nothing. And therefore, I have nothing to lose. With that, he strengthened his grip on the other Mordred's arm. The other Mordred glanced at Morgan, wanting to say something. But he never did. Because in the next moment, he was gone. He vanished without a trace, as if he had never existed at all. Where did he go? Effie's tone changed halfway through the sentence as she realized the pointlessness of her question. The answer was obvious. Into the bastard's personal mirror realm, Sunny gritted his teeth. Of course. He had known about Mordred's ascended ability for a long time. It allowed the Prince of Nothing to establish a physical space in the realm of reflections and store objects in it, as well as his morbid collection of vessels. But that was not all he could place into his minor domain. He could pull people into the mirror realm, too. Sunny had been drawn into it once himself, in twilight. He remembered it vividly, the vast and somber expanse, a gray sky covered by stormy clouds, white mist swirling around his feet, and a radiant sphere shining like a pale sun above, its rays falling like silver pillars through the veil of clouds. Mordred's mirror realm was a reflection of his soul sea, at least it had been when he was a master. Now that he was a saint, his personal mirror realm would have evolved into a minor domain and come to resemble that of Soul Stealer, most likely. He glanced at Mordred with a hint of dark resentment in his eyes. Mordred chuckled. Yes, indeed. Back when I needed to hide him, all those years back, I was merely awakened. I did not have such a convenient power yet, but I do now. Is there a better place to hide my flaw than my own soul sea? Where would he ever be safer? Nowhere. As long as I keep him imprisoned in my soul, I will always be able to keep an eye on him. So, I had to retrieve him from the Palace of Imagination before the Dreamspawn did it for me. He sighed. Of course, various obstacles got in the way. I did not expect Morgan to be here and poison the pathetic worm's illusion with her bloodlust. I did not expect such an elaborate illusion to exist, either. This place had been quite different when I visited last, you see. Most of all, I did not expect to be stripped of my aspect and be hunted down by the Castellan like a rat. That was quite a troublesome development, to say the least. A pale smile appeared on Mordred's lips. Ah, but I endured and persevered. You suspected me of being the nihilist, Sunless, but of course, I did not kill those people. Which is not to say, that I didn't kill other people. He laughed. It's just I would never be so careless as to leave bodies lying around. I planned to dispose of them using the drainage collectors at first, but what would you know? There was no need. My victims, unlike those of the nihilist, simply disappeared like mist. Mordred inhaled deeply and glanced at the harrowing vista of the drowned city with regret. Such a waste, but no matter. I managed to survive the pursuit of the Castellan and even recover some of my power, not enough to unlock my ascended ability, sadly, and not nearly enough to take the axis of this entire world and get out alive. With all my spare attires destroyed, I needed someone who possessed a role in this bizarre world to do it for me, to get me close to my flaw, at the right moment. You have my gratitude for that, Sunless. He shrugged. Oh, and for bringing me all these mercenaries on a silver platter. With their lives and that of Matic, I finally managed to regain access to my mirror realm. So, this is where we say goodbye, I guess. Sunny smiled crookedly. What a polite farewell. Something tells me that this is not how you were planning to part with us, though. You were probably planning to kill us first before leaving to turn the tables and hunt down the castellan like a rat, instead. However, you failed to anticipate one thing, didn't you? He glanced at Mordred with a chilling darkness nestling in his eyes. You failed to anticipate Saint. Saint moved slightly at that moment, looking at Mordred with cold, frightening indifference. His smile faltered for a split second. Why, yes. I loathe to admit it, but I really did not anticipate that your gorgeous companion would turn out to be one of Nether's children. What an ill-fated coincidence, or possibly a fortuitous one, who's to say? Ah, but you are wrong, Sunless. He raised a hand and rubbed his temple, a strange grimace appearing on his face for a brief moment. I never intended to kill you. Morgan, sure. Raised by wolves, as well, to eliminate the risk of her regaining a measure of control over the palace of imagination before I escaped it. But even though I would love nothing more than to see you pay for the death of my father, pay terribly. I need you alive. A pale smile bloomed on his lips. After all, I need you in Changing Star to last as long as possible against the Dreamspawn. The guiding light and the shadow of humanity, you are meant to be my meat shield, you know. What an honor. Laughing, he took a step back. So live long, Sunless. Live long and struggle desperately. Oh, and by the way. Mordred made a dramatic pause, looking at him with a smile. That damn miscreant. In the short moment Sunny spent feverishly considering what to do next, Morgan suddenly stepped forward. Her gloves were long gone, and her delicate, pale fingers were spread slightly, glistening with the drops of rain like 10 razor-sharp knives. What? Can't come up with something else to say to stall more? Casting a brief look at Sunny, she said in an even tone. Take Athena and go find the Castellan, Lord of Shadows. Dr. Saint and I will hold him back. Sunny gave her a long look. Morgan was mundane, and Mordred seemed to have regained the power of an ascended. Challenging him would be absolutely deadly for her, even with Saint fighting by her side. But that wasn't even the main problem. How are you going to hold him back? His dormant ability allows him to jump between reflections. He can slip away anytime he wants. Morgan smiled darkly. He might have regained some power, but he did not regain all of his power. Actually, although he is hiding it, he is barely holding it together, because of the rain. Sunny's eyes widened a little. The rain. Mordred could sense reflections and travel between them. And currently, there were millions of tiny mirrors around them, every drop of rain reflected the world as it fell from the sky, and all those reflections multiplied as they contained each other, creating an endless labyrinth of mirrors. Mordred's mind was constantly assaulted by that boundless abyss of reflections, and even if he attempted to hide it, it must have put an immense stain on him. More importantly, Morgan spoke again. He can indeed escape into reflections, but first, he needs to find the right one. That is why he wasted time giving us a winded speech, and that is why he has not escaped yet. So, go. Hurry. Sunny glanced at her, then at Mordred. Mordred smiled. Ah, my dear sister makes some sense. But, you see. However, he could not finish the sentence. Because at that moment, Sunny spun around and grabbed Effie, shouting, Saint! And a split second later, Saint vanished from where she stood and slammed into Mordred, sending them both crashing into the parapet. Morgan rushed forward, as well. Sunny did not see it, though, because he was already running toward the stairs. Sunny and Effie rushed down the long spiral staircase, jumping over several stone steps with each stride. The great tower shook around them as Mordred, Morgan, and Saint clashed on its roof. Sunny did not know who would win in that fight or for how long the two women would be able to hold the Prince of Nothing back, so there was no time to waste. Effie seemed to understand that, as well. I just have one question. She failed to make a tight enough turn and slammed into a wall, using it to direct her momentum. How the hell are we supposed to find the Castellan? Sunny was cursing the height of the great tower and the length of the stairs when he heard the question. His muscles had already been burning because of the climb up, and now, he had to descend the same way in a rush. Where to find the Castellan, indeed. At the moment, he was going over everything that Mordred had told him and trying to understand which of his words were true, and which were a lie. Mordred was a frighteningly skilled manipulator, and he knew how to masterfully mix truth and deceit to control his targets. In hindsight, he had to be humans naturally rejected anyone who was not like them, and so, he would have had to read their thoughts and emotions flawlessly if he wanted to fit in. Even before that, he would have become adept at reading emotions while growing up next to Anvil and Asterion. That said, Sunny did not think that Mordred had lied about countless things here in Mirage City, just about the most important things. That was because he had needed Sunny and Effie to know the true state and function of the Palace of Imagination in order to use them as proxy agents against the Castellan. He had definitely exaggerated how dangerous the Castellan was to anyone who wasn't him, somewhat, while at the same time understating how rough a form the Castellan was in. The flood that destroyed Mirage City was most likely a manifestation of that ancient reflection failing to endure the pressure of having to incorporate conflicting desires into its grand illusion without the guidance of the castle master. The Castellan was breaking down, just like the Northern Dam had, and the illusion of Mirage City was breaking down with it. So, where would Sunny find the Castellan? Most of Mirage City was gone, now. Only the tallest buildings remained above the water, and the castle, of course. There was a slim chance that the Castellan was in one of the remaining buildings, but Sunny doubted that. No, the ancient reflection would be somewhere here, in the stronghold of its former master. But where? It was not the throne room or the roof of the great tower. It was not the courtyard, either. The castle was vast, and there were plenty of halls in it. Sunny glanced at Effie. You know the layout of Bastion pretty well, right? This replica of the castle seems smaller, but there should be some similarity. How similar are they? By then, they had almost reached the throne room. Pretty similar. Sunny nodded. So, how would one get to the Great Mirror? Effie almost stumbled. The Great Mirror? There was the true Great Mirror, standing in the middle of the Hall of Imagination in True Bastion. But there was also the false Great Mirror, hidden deep inside the mountain under the illusory bastion, that one, the rulers of Clan Valor and later Effie had used to control the component of the Great Citadel that allowed it to travel between reality and illusions. The false Great Mirror led to True Bastion, while the real Great Mirror led to the Palace of Imagination. But there was a castle in Mirage City, as well. So, wouldn't it be natural to assume that there would be a third version of the Great Mirror here, as well? Just how deep does this infinity mirror go? Effie remained motionless for a moment, looking around with a bewildered expression, then nodded resolutely. Follow me. They rushed to an alcove behind the throne, where another door was hidden behind a tapestry. The castle itself was a labyrinth, but Effie was able to navigate it with at least some level of confidence. She had been ruling Bastion for more than a year, after all, so this was a replica of her seat of power. Where is it? Where is it? Soon, they stopped near an unassuming wall. Looking around, Effie pulled on a metal torch holder fastened to the wall, then turned it slightly. A section of the wall suddenly receded and then slid sideways, revealing a dark passage. Effie smiled faintly. Still works. However, in the next moment, both of them froze. What is this? As soon as the secret passage opened, a peculiar sound reached their ears. It was quiet and subtle, as if coming from a great distance, but also impossible to ignore due to how out of place it seemed. Sunny was pretty sure that what they heard was music. It was a clear sound of strings being plucked to sing a haunting, melancholic melody. They glanced at each other, not knowing how to react. "Let's proceed." Effie nodded, just as bewildered and disturbed as Sunny. They entered the secret passage, traversed a maze of dusty stone corridors, and reached a deep well leading to the depths of the mountain. A narrow staircase was clinging to its wall. They descended it without wasting any time, knowing that somewhere far above, Morgan and Saint were fighting Mordred with their lives on the line. The deeper into the depths of the mountain they descended, the clearer and louder the forlorn melody became, until it filled their ears completely, making them both feel like they were lost in it. Soon enough, they reached the bottom of the well and found themselves standing in front of towering gates. Sunny held his breath for a moment, then took a step forward and pushed the gates open. Out there behind them stood a vast underground chamber, much too vast for the scale of the mountain, clearly greater than the space it was supposed to take up. An immense mirror was standing in its heart, towering at least 100 meters in height. It was covered by a sheet of thin black fabric, which moved slightly in a ghostly wind. And in front of the mirror, sitting on the stone floor with his back to them, Sunny and Effie finally beheld the Castellan,